All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Well, you can see this is going really well already. Kim McAllister here on the Mark Thompson Show. And I'm by myself today, I'll tell you that. So Mark is working at KFI. Albert is overseas. Tony is at his other job. And that just leaves me. So I'm trying to push all the buttons by myself. Not doing very well. And my computer froze in the middle of it all. So thank you for being on the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Kim McAllister. I'm in for Mark today. Mark back tomorrow. Today he's working on KFI. So he, again, will be back tomorrow. And I got to fly this Mark Thompson ship solo. I'm glad to do it. Glad to be here. There's a lot to talk about. And I have snippets of Mark. So you'll be excited to find out that you'll see him during the show here and there, if I can figure out how to make it all happen and make it all work. Over the weekend, there was a big Veterans Day parade in Petaluma, where I am in the North Bay. And this town has, I think it's the biggest Veterans Day parade in the North Bay. There were hundreds of entries in the parade, thousands of people lining the streets. And I was there. I often go, but this year my daughter was in the parade because she was part of the marching band. The high school marching band that was part of the parade. So I'm sitting there with my mom, and we watched this contingent of Native American veterans roll by. And my mom leans over and she says, how could they fight for a country that treated them so poorly? And I've been thinking about it all weekend long, the why. How this could be, how this country could have taken their land, in many cases, tried to beat their religion out of them, assimilate them into this culture, and if they didn't, then kill them, treated them abominably, and still they serve the country. My husband tried to say it's because they're defending their land too. And can you love parts of America, but not all parts of America? It's something I'm interested in talking about with you. And if you have a connection to someone who is a Native American person who served in the United States military, by all means, please let them know we're talking about this, because I'd really love to hear their perspective on it. I'm interested in knowing what the thought process was there in serving the country. Another story that just popped up as Nikki's show was going on is the Trump case. And Eric Trump Jr. was called to testify for the prosecution in this case, the New York Attorney General in the fraud case. He's also now back on the stand because he's been called to testify for the defense in this civil fraud trial. He is back on the stand today. Apparently, he made a bit of a joke about perjury when he was on the stand. Maybe not so funny. I don't know. He was being questioned by New York Attorney General Letitia James earlier this month, as we mentioned. And I guess so far today, he's walked through the history of the Trump Organization, of course, praised his father, calling him a visionary and an artist with real estate. You do real estate art? Okay. And yeah, cracking a joke about perjury, which I don't necessarily know if you want to be cracking jokes about perjury when you're on the stand in a fraud trial. Nah, maybe not so funny. I don't know. He said, I'd say it's nice to be here, but I have a feeling the Attorney General would sue me for perjury. Ha ha ha. He's the same one. He's taking this whole trial so flippantly. He's the same son that told the court sketch artist to make him look sexy last time. Like, do you or do you not take the trial seriously? I get having a sense of humor about things. And when you can make the jury smile, of this case, there is no jury, then maybe sometimes, it's better for you. But there is no jury. Just tell the truth. Just get up there, tell the truth, and get out. Don't need to crack jokes. Don't need to do all that stuff. No. No, no, no. Another story that I'd like to talk to you about a little later in the show is, the show with Joe Scarborough, the morning show. They've been in the news a lot. Today he said something pretty inflammatory, Mr. Scarborough, when it comes to Trump. They accused him, Joe Scarborough, of going full on Hitler. Well, why? It's because of what Trump says he's going to do if he gets reelected, and that is root out his liberal opponents. He called them vermin in social media, Trump did. And Saturday in a speech in New Hampshire, he said it as well. So he said he's going to root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country. And that vermin, that way of speaking, apparently is reminiscent of Hitler. Now, anytime someone makes the comparison to Hitler, I have to say, there's a huge difference between killing people, right? Not liking what the military or what the media has to say, which Trump doesn't, and has basically placed a target on the media, right? Coined the term fake news, and basically undermine the job of the United States media, in my opinion. There's a big difference between that and not liking what the media has to say and walking into a newsroom and shooting them dead. That would be Hitler. Huge comparison there. No comparison, rather. Huge difference in what that means. So while I understand the call out with the vermin comment, I don't know, but we'll talk about that as well. First, though, I do want to get to Mark Thompson because he's so nice. He knew I was going to be alone, and he did record a little something for me to play for you guys. We had promised you the story of what happened with his mom's car in Washington, D.C., and we didn't want to not deliver that. So here's Mark. He's telling the story of his mom's car. Then we've got a little special law and disorder. And let me play that for you. It was stuck in your pocket when you got onto the passenger boat, like the safety boat?
The menu was brought to his attention. I
don't know if I've done that right. Let me try to. Let me do that differently. How about we do that a little differently? Here it is. There we go. Okay. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm telling you, I'm setting the bar low like Albert so that, you think I've really succeeded at the end of this whole thing. But here it is. Mark's going to be like, oh, Kim, this is bad. Here he is. This is Mark Thompson on what is indeed the Mark Thompson Show. Well, I can't get it to have sound. Interestingly, we had sound at the beginning, but we don't have sound now. I'm so sorry, you guys. I'll try to see if I can't make that work. I might have to shut my computer down and try again. I don't know. This is kind of messy. But I see you in the chat. You guys, thank you for being here, and thank you for putting up with me. Let's talk a little bit about this Native American story that we had discussed first. And that is why Native Americans would serve America in the military. So I'm going to go into the chat and see what you guys have to say. I guess there would be a reason to protect America since your people are here, since your land is here. But there was a very large number of Native American veterans that were marching in this Veterans Day parade. And so it's something I did want to find out what you guys had to say about it. Take some callers. It's all right. You guys are so supportive. I totally love you. Oh, John Watson said it's because they got drafted. You may absolutely be right about that. And that is something that I wasn't thinking about as I saw them roll by, but there were a lot of Vietnam era Native Americans that were in this parade. So you may be right. That may be one of the only reasons that they would. I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but probably for a lot of them, it may be. So, yeah, perhaps you're right about that. Let's see, Brian. Before Hitler, you're talking about the Hitler story. Before Hitler began killing people, he spoke in the same manner used by Trump and threatened his opposition in the same manner as Trump. That is a fact I have seen in Holocaust times. I don't disagree that before the violence begins, there's words and there's rhetoric and there's messaging. I don't disagree with that. And that may be comparable. That may be the truth. But I think when you compare someone to Hitler, the first thought is death, killing, worst of the worst, and I don't think we're definitely at worst of the worst at this time. PT writing, military is a job they can get. Right. Mindy talking about they were required to serve. Beth says enlisting in the military is a time-honored way out of poverty. Manita writes, Joe Scarborough is right. It's about time that he called Trump for what he is. I don't usually agree with Joe. This time, yes. Why is the media afraid to speak the truth? Wake up before it's too late. I just feel like when you compare someone to Hitler, it's extremely egregious and serious, right? At this point, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know if there really is even a comparison. He's so awful and such a murderer and killer that I don't know if it seems to almost weaken the horror of what he did to compare anyone else to him. I guess that's where I'm coming from it. John talking about in World War II, they used Native American code talkers who used their language to send and receive communications for the high command. I do remember that. Was it Navajo that was the code speak was in? Yeah. Jim, again, I saw a documentary showing that Navajo played a big role in defeating Japan. Yes, using their language as code. Exactly. Knit One Pearl One says, because they're also humans, just like the rest of us, also an opportunity for money, for college, and for a way to see other places. That's all true. Yeah. Karen says Japanese Americans stepped up during World War II to prove their patriotism, maybe the same by Native Americans. It's true. And I wonder if it's even a racist question to consider. But I don't know. I thought about that as well. Lori writes, many Native Americans got drafted and they still live here, so they still might feel like they're defending their homeland. Also, benefits from the military are a draw for low-income people. It's true. Lori kicking in some support. Here we go with a $20 super sticker. Lori, thank you so much. What I didn't ask for you guys to do, if you could, is click the like button. That's free. And if you're here and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe as well. As they say, click like and subscribe. And then the super sticker is open. Lori from the Above the Bar, huge thank you for the way you support the show. Of course, Lori at the Red Jack in San Francisco, one of our favorite places in the city. And so thank you very much, Lori. If anybody's in the city on Bay Street, stop in and say hello to Lori, and please patronize the Red Jack Saloon in San Francisco. Again, huge thank you. I should tell you that we have a website. Patreon and PayPal links are also included there at the website, and that is themarkthompsonshow.com. That is, again, themarkthompsonshow.com, and that is where you'll find the Patreon link and the PayPal link. Of course, the Mark merch is perfect for holiday gift giving, and you'll find the link to the Mark merchandise show there as well. I am going to try my hardest to play this for you because we recorded it and I don't want to waste it, and the story's really good. I think the story's really good. So let me try one more time to see if I can't share this excellent conversation that Mark and I had about what happened with his mom's car and a little lawn disorder as well. See if I can do this all by myself. I can. I'm sure I can. There it is. Hopefully we have sound this time. I tried to reboot.
You know,
There it
I've
is.
just returned from my parents' place. My dad and mom, we're looking at assisted living places for them. Maybe if they want to move out of the house, they don't have to, but it might be easier. My dad has 24-hour caregivers now, and he's in pretty good shape, but he still, occasionally needs some help on stuff. So anyway, they're there also to make sure nothing bad happens. So anyway, I'm using my mom's car, Kim, to reach some of these places. Like I took an Uber to a place that wasn't so far away because my mom had the car. She still drives at 93. She's really good. Yeah. I mean, she's not at Talladega anytime soon, but she's a pretty good driver on city streets, and most of the places she's going are very close by. Anyway, so she had her car. I had driven it for a couple of days. You have to know, my mom's got a beater car. It's fairly new in terms of mileage, but it's,
Right.
yeah. And it's filled with stuff. She was a former teacher. So there's all these materials. She's used to having stuff everywhere. And they're pencils and, colored markers and all these stacks of newspaper and other stuff. And she's grading papers at red lights. I don't know what she's doing.
It's a teacher's car.
It's
Book
crazy.
bags and boxes.
Yeah.
My mom's the same way. Yeah.
It's unreal. So anyway, she came back from a morning errand, and I was going to take the car to go far away to this assisted living place that's a little farther away. I couldn't take an Uber there. And there's my mom's car. Those watching on YouTube. Okay. That's her car. Now, I want you to notice something about this car. You notice the right front hubcap is off. Okay. So it's the black Camry with the right front hubcap off. And it's sometimes because a lot of people have these cars, I recognize it that way. Okay. Because it's got the hubcap off.
Sure.
Anyway, so I'm running to that car to go to this place, and I've got, my phone and so, whatever other materials I've got there, and I'm late. And I run out of the house and I jump into the car, and it's even more trash than it normally is. There's a half drunk cup of water that's tipped over. If I drove, there'd be water all over the seat and stuff. On that same seat, there are those, is it noodles, the microwave noodles things?
Like a cup of noodle? Mm-hmm.
Cup of noodles, thank you. There are a couple of canisters of that, and a bag of apples. I'm thinking, Mom, why are you? I look at the bag of apples.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there was a mug, kind of like one of our Mark Thompson Show mugs, but it's in the middle, in one of those cup holders. It wasn't a Mark Thompson Show mug, but it was one of those.
It was a ceramic mug?
Ceramic mug. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm late. I'm going, I can't go with this car, like this, with even more trash in the cup with the water.
Yeah.
So there was a plastic bag there in the car, and I opened it, and I put some stuff that I thought was just trash. I put it in that bag.
Yeah.
And then I grab the noodles and the apples, and I run out of the car. First, I stop at the trash can, and I drop that stuff in the trash. Then I go into the house. I go, Mom, I can't drive the car with, a bag of apples and these noodles. Do you want these things? Why did you leave them in the car?
Right.
And she says, what are you talking about? And I said, here, look, this bag of apples and this bag of noodles, this was on the passenger seat. She said, those didn't come from my car. She said, I don't. And I said, isn't your car the black Camry with the, she said, yeah, but that's, I run back out and I see, and sure enough, there is another car just like that. That's the car, the one you're looking at now, that I jumped in. And she yells to me, that's the caregiver's car. And I'm thinking, oh no.
But wait, it also doesn't have the hub.
Thank you. That is the key fact.
Interesting.
The caregiver's car is the same car with the same hubcap off.
Oh, man.
It's insanity.
Why are you yelling?
I would have done the same thing. I don't know how you met. Yeah.
So I jump back into the car and I put everything back exactly the way it was. Then I run to the trash can. I get the stuff out of the trash and I put that there.
And do you tell the guy, like, I'm sorry,
no.
I mistook your car for ours? No?
I did not tell him, unless Mom told him.
Did you have to walk right past your mom's car in the driveway to get to the caregiver's car in the street? Or how did this work out?
So I didn't have to. The driveway is, that's a really good question. It's about, I'm going to say it's 15 feet to the right of the front door as you go out. And so I just see that Mom's car is back and I'm late for this appointment. So when I look out to the street, I see the same car with the hubcap off, and I just run out to the street going, okay, Mom, I'll see you in a few hours. I'm late for this appointment.
Sure.
That's how I missed the car that's parked in the driveway.
Yep.
Pretty, super embarrassing. Probably could have been worse, but pretty embarrassing.
Did the caregiver ever realize that you had been rifling through his things?
No, as I said, I didn't tell him, and he didn't ask any questions. So let's keep it that way. All right, Kim?
The Mark Thompson Show.
So we want to do a couple of things for you.
Yes.
I've got a law and disorder, but before I get to it, there's a big auction coming up. A large sale of maritime items. Maritime means it's related to the sea.
Right.
Isn't that right?
Like
The
a
mistress
captain's
of the
wheel
sea.
or a horn or maybe I don't know, a circular window, a buoy.
We get the idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The auction will include hundreds of maritime items along the lines of what Kim was just regaling you with, and also stuff from the Titanic.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is going to be an auction in England where they will be auctioning off things from the Titanic.
Where do they get these things?
Recovered from a Titanic lifeboat. The blanket that will be on auction. There's a pocket watch that will be up there, owned by a second-class passenger, a Russian immigrant, who did not survive the sinking. There's several dinner menus from the Titanic. And the dinner menus, they think, will go for big money. Over the years, some tattered menus from the Titanic have come up for auction and commanded hefty prices. A first-class menu from the ship's last lunch was sold. Oh, this is a good one. How much was the first-class menu from the ship's last lunch sold for at auction 11 years ago? Tell me in the chat. In the chat, tell us what the Titanic menu from the ship's last lunch sold for.
So interesting.
Yeah. You see the guesses on screen now.
Yeah.
Kim is dutifully putting up those guesses.
Yeah.
And the actual retail price, $120,000. Yeah, you probably, would have thought it might have gone for even more than that. But
I wonder how they have things like that in such good shape. I guess maybe it was stuck in your pocket when you got onto the passenger boat, like the safety boat.
the menu was brought to his attention, the auction organizer, because you've asked a very good question, Kim. This summer, it was discovered in a photo album from the 1960s. The photo album was kept by a community historian in Nova Scotia. So Halifax, a city more than 200 miles southwest of Dominion, was the base for the search and recovery efforts of the Titanic. So it's not completely ridiculous that the menu would end up there. Some of the Titanic's victims were buried at sea. Others were either shipped to their home communities or buried in Halifax. Anyway, it's unclear, Kim, how this guy acquired the menu. So,
What?
yeah, I know. But his son-in-law shipped it to the auctioneer. There is the menu now if you're watching. The original Titanic menus, they just have not been discovered. When he got this one, the guy who's organizing this whole thing, the Titanic specialist, if you will, he says, I opened the box and was like, OMG. Wow. Where's I think that's 3 OMGs for the Titanic.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Thank you. Anyway, the president of the Titanic International Society said that all the items come up for sale in several categories. And things that went down with the ship that night that have since been recovered is one of the categories. Possessions of surviving passengers and crew is another. And items that were removed from the ship as keepsakes as people fled. That's the last category. He thinks, the guy organizing it thinks that if they were removed from the ship as keepsakes as people fled, then this is fair game. It's not like you're taking something from those who perished that night.
So this is the last meal. The hors d'oeuvre is oysters. The consommé renaissance is creme de asparagus.
Wow.
They had salmon hollandaise, white bait. They had a tornado of beef a la Victoria.
Wow.
They had squab and spring lamb and roast chicken and a sirloin of beef and green peas and pureed parsnips and boiled rice and potatoes.
Wow.
There's never been anything like this.
It sure does sound pretty.
They
it's
had
pretty,
apricots Bordelou and petite mocha for dessert.
Listen to you.
There is nothing in our history that quite compares
to this. I agree. Anyway, this will be interesting. It'll fetch over, you would think, over $130,000.
$130,000 for that? For a piece of paper?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty historic piece of paper, though, Kim.
Well, I mean, it's cool, but come on.
A letter written by an American first-class passenger aboard the Titanic sold for about $153,000. This is 11 years ago.
Yeah.
5,500 items the following year were recovered from the wreckage and sold to 3 hedge funds for more than $19 million. They just bought the whole group of items. Anyway, that's the latest on that. That is up for auction, I believe, this week. So maritime memorabilia dealers and, this is like a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
I saw that and it just jumped out at me. I've got a really big law and disorder. There's a lot going on. Do you want to, I guess you'll bring me on and you'll with our special law. Before you do, smash the like button for Kim,
with your iron rod.
who's really running stuff, even though it doesn't look like
smash
she
it
is.
for you, who jumped in to record this with me over the weekend. So you're awesome.
Yeah, that's true. I did do that.
Kim, how are you?
Yeah.
You ready?
So, all right. So now, without any further delay, here's some law and disorder.
In the criminal justice system, the people
Pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care.
are represented by 2 separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
The DOJ, you know what they are, right? DOJ stands for Department of Justice. They announce arrests. It's a high-end brothel network, Kim.
Oh,
It's
no.
a high-end brothel
Why are you
network.
yelling?
That's not my description. That's the description of the DOJ.
Wow.
3 individuals arrested on charges of operating a high-end brothel network in Massachusetts and Virginia, with clientele that included elected officials, military officers, government contractors, government contractors with security clearances. Pick a profession, said the acting U.S. attorney. This sprawling client list, if you just pick a profession, it's represented in this case. People of all walks of life were on the client list, Kim. That's the point.
Like, what do you mean, all walks of life?
Meaning professionals and, as mentioned, any number of government officials, military officers, elected officials. I mean, it's pretty wide-reaching. I have to say, though, to be fair to them, if you're going to go for a brothel network, why not go for a high-end brothel network? Good for you. Yeah.
I mean, I see the point. Yes.
Yeah. The three guys, Han Lee, who's 41 from Cambridge, James Lee, 68 from Torrance, California, and Jumyoung Lee, who's 30 from Dedham, Massachusetts, they've all been charged with conspiracy to coerce and entice to travel to engage in illegal, it's all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
these are like, I don't know, what are they thinking, like politicians we would know type of thing?
Well, there might. I'm sure I would guess in New England they might be. Well, I don't know if
Is this
they're
going to be a
national
Heidi
politicians.
Fleiss style list? I mean, are we going to get the juice or what?
Are doctors, lawyers, they're accountants, they're elected officials, they are executives of high-tech companies and pharmaceutical companies, he said. They are military officers, government contractors, professors, scientists. They are the men who fuel this commercial sex ring from all of those occupations. There are potentially hundreds of individuals who took these services as commercial sex buyers, he says. Alleged sex buyers in this scheme first had to respond to a survey and provide information online, including their driver's license photos and their employer information, credit card information. Wow. They gave up a lot of information, Kim.
So they know who these people are.
Yeah. The network, the prostitution network, primarily used two websites that advertised appointments, and they said about 20 sex buyers were interviewed in connection with the multi-year investigation. I've noticed the sex investigations, they take longer than the other ones. Is that? Have you noticed that? The detectives take a little longer on the brothel case than they do on busting some south of the border kind of Mexican cartel. It's just a point. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of what I've noticed. Meanwhile, Elise Stefanik has filed an ethics complaint against the Trump trial judge. Okay? That's the fraud trial. It's in New York. Now, Elise Stefanik, is the Republican congressperson from New York. She filed a judicial ethics complaint Friday against the New York judge overseeing the former president's civil fraud trial. She says the judge has shown inappropriate bias and judicial intemperance. Yeah, it just seems like all the intemperance in the room is being taken up by your pal. But Elise Stefanik, I believe, because she is completely in the clutches of Trump. You talk about somebody who is, at his beck and call. And my feeling is she's playing for the future, right? If he wins, she wants a place in his cabinet, clearly, because that's a ridiculous filing on the part of Elise Stefanik. And yet she files this ethics complaint against this, the Trump fraud trial judge.
That's crazy.
Yeah. In San Francisco, a prominent San Francisco developer and two others are charged with bribery. This is a widening corruption scandal. Federal authorities have charged 3 current and former executives from a San Francisco design and engineering firm, accused them of bribing employees from the city's Department of Building Inspection.
Big surprise in San Francisco.
We do have a history in San Francisco of some bribes going down.
Yeah.
So, just saying, I'm not, but Kim's right.
They're, the building code inspection people. Yeah. Not surprised.
Well, and you've got the mayor with, what's her name? The ex-boyfriend?
Yeah. Mohammed Nuru and London
Thank
Breed.
you.
And
Nuru actually was convicted. So they're, There it is. It's a widening corruption scandal. Payoffs at City Hall, potentially.
Oh, man.
But meantime, an ex-CIA officer pleads guilty to drugging, sexually abusing multiple women during his overseas posts. Brian Jeffrey Raymond pleaded guilty. Drugged and sexually abused multiple women during overseas postings, according to court documents in the Department of Justice. He's 47 years old. He admitted to it. He did it at his embassy-leased housing in Mexico City and in other locations between 2006 and 2020. Wow, 14 years of doing this. He also admitted that he recorded and photographed 28 victims who were nude or partially nude without their consent while they were unconscious or incapable of consenting. This guy's a real dirtball. He's looking at up to 30 years in prison, and he'll have to pay mandatory restitution to his victims, according to the Justice Department. Jeffrey Raymond is his name. Scumbags don't come a whole lot bigger than that.
Yeah.
Continuing with some law and disorder, I must tell you, a Tarzana man, Tarzana in Southern California, he's been arrested after a human torso was found in a plastic bag. You know, cops found this plastic bag near a dumpster in Encino. A woman's dismembered torso. Well, it's nice to be demonetized for the day for talking about this, but it seems kind of, you know, it's the gruesomeness of this that is also the horror and why this guy belongs behind bars. They're still working to identify who this poor woman is.
Oh,
can you imagine that?
No.
But they have made an arrest. They looked at surveillance footage, and they developed evidence that led to this guy. This guy, Haskell, is his name. And May Haskell was the woman. I'm sorry. So that's the woman. Excuse me. Officers located the body of the woman. Isn't that how it happened? Okay. And then they put together a case against the guy. Excuse me. But anyway, residents of the area are shocked, and the whole thing is pretty ugly. Yeah. Meantime, as long as we've gotten ugly, I can share this with you. There is a coroner, and this is, I mean, it's real. The LA County Medical Examiner investigator apparently stole valuable items from dead people. This is in Los Angeles.
How much lower can you get?
I know, exactly. We thought we had hit bottom before. This investigator for the LA County Medical Examiner's Office has been charged with grand theft. He took items off of deceased individuals during death investigations. Adrian Munoz, he's only 34 years old, was suspended and charged with one felony count of grand theft. It seems as though there should be a special category besides just grand theft.
It's like the ultimate, the ultimate sign of disrespect.
Thank you.
It's awful. That's awful.
Authorities say surveillance footage caught Munoz stealing a gold crucifix chain from a man who had died of a heart attack on the job at a warehouse. Investigators later searched Munoz's cubicle and discovered rare antique coins and a receipt belonging to a man who had died. And his death investigation had been handled by Munoz.
What a scumbag.
Not very creative either. I mean, just put the stuff in his desk, and I mean, he clearly didn't think it was going to be investigated, but he is being arraigned, and his days of, plucking stuff off of dead people are done.
Well, imagine if that's the care with which he gives them at the end of their life, imagine the lack of care during the investigation with all the other aspects of it as well.
See, I mean, it's a fair point. I mean, you expect a level of professionalism from people. I mean, and especially if we give cops and doctors, a certain level of respect because we just feel baked into their job is a a level of profession. We do the same thing with the military. You know what I mean? Anybody who's got that sort of regimented presentation, you give them an amount of respect. But the reality is that you know, once in a while, and by the way, probably deserving of the respect for the most part. And then once in a while, you get some medical examiner rolling up in L.A. and, you know, they're picking the pockets of dead people. You won't see that on one of those NCIS shows, will you? When that medical examiner shows up, they have their act together. But it
well,
is
and
a
then they
brutal
they
story.
romanticize it on the medical examiner show. It's like, we're the voice for the people that no longer have a voice, for the victims of society. And then you've got this guy rolling up. He's like, what can I take for myself today? I'll take one of these, and I'll take one of these. Got some rare coins, do you? All right.
He really views every crime scene as a kind of property buffet. Take whatever you want.
Season, exactly.
Wow. It is really, it's really bottom. It's low end. Well, that, my friends, is Law and Disorder.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
Yeah, huge thank you. Oh, I'll get it right. Huge thank you to Mark Thompson for recording that. So funny that he hopped in the wrong car and then didn't tell the guy about it either. Thank you for sticking with me here on the Mark Thompson Show. It is Monday, which means we have Mark's Murder Mystery Monday. Later in the show, Karen Dawn will be here to talk about animals. Right now, though, I want to try to share something else with you. Currently, there are 3 people rappelling down the side of the Trans-America Pyramid. Of course, we know that today the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, or APEC, started. Lots of streets closed in downtown San Francisco. It is a traffic nightmare. I was going to say a bit of a traffic nightmare. No, it's a traffic nightmare. And a lot of protesters showed up over the weekend as well. Hundreds of people for all different issues. There were Gaza, Israel war protesters. There were people protesting for the environment, against corporations and being involved in government, all kinds of things. So lots of protests going on in San Francisco over the weekend. And I'm not sure if this has anything to do with that, but our friends at ABC7 are watching this situation where 3 people, again, are scaling down the side of the Trans-America Pyramid in San Francisco. So let's see if we can't take a look at what's happening in the city as this very interesting thing happens. Oh, no. Yeah. Sky 7 was over the scene where 3 people were rappelling down the side of the pyramid. I'm not sure if I can get this video to play, or maybe the live video is over. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe it was a quick rappelling down the side of the Trans-America Pyramid. Oh, there they are. There's the 3 of them going down. And I don't know if this was in conjunction with some type of a protest. I would imagine that it had to do with APEC being in San Francisco and them trying to call attention to something. But that's quite a sight. Never seen anything like this before. Yeah. And so down they go. Thanks to ABC7 for catching this from Sky 7. I'm sure that was an interesting call when they had to call the pilot. Hey, you need to go fly near the Trans-America Pyramid. There's 3 people on ropes going down the side. Yeah. Again, not sure if this is in conjunction with some type of protest, but it's very likely that it has something to do with APEC being in San Francisco. We know that President Biden and the president of China, Xi Jinping, are set to meet face-to-face on Wednesday in San Francisco. It's a big deal. There's a lot of dignitaries in the city. There's a lot of world leaders in San Francisco, and this whole area of the city was cleaned up, swept up, and closed off. They mean business. The Secret Service is there. The FBI is there. You've got lots of law enforcement all over San Francisco, making sure that this section of San Francisco where APEC is being held is safe. I was talking to Nikki Maduro earlier, and she was saying that if they can keep the homeless people off the sidewalks and keep everything clean for this, then why can't they always do it? Well, Yes, APEC does stand for Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. We're throwing summit on the end because I think that just makes it make more sense. Egolf Twitler, nice name, says it's a forum to promote trade, investment, and economic development among nations around the Pacific Ocean, the Pacific Rim. That's correct. They said it started with 12 members in 1989, but has since grown to 21, including China, Russia, Japan, the United States, and Australia. Great information. Aussie Rules calls APEC a boondoggle since the 1990s. But here they are, in San Francisco, trying to talk about how to better the economy around the Pacific Rim. I don't know what President Biden and Xi Jinping have on the agenda to discuss, but it's something that we'll be on top of, looking for that. Oh, Karen says actor Jared Leto climbed the Empire State Building just a few days ago. I didn't know that. Well, maybe that's him scaling down the side of the Transamerica Pyramid in San Francisco. Okay, it is Mark's Murder Mystery Monday, and so I have another surprise for you. If I can make this work, then maybe I'll raise my bar just a little bit higher. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to set myself up for complete and utter failure, although Mark would likely argue that that has already happened. But what I will say is that we do have a Mark's Murder Mystery Monday, and I'm very excited to share it with you. Let me see if I can't find it. Yes. Courtney has joined us, and she has a special guest for the Mark's Murder Mystery Monday this week. Sorry, my website crashed, so I have to get it back up and running and get the right video here. But it's a really interesting case this week, I will say. And we have a special guest from KFI. It's Steve Gregory from KFI Radio. So let me see if I can now share this with you and present to you on this Monday, Mark's Murder Mystery Monday. And hopefully there's sound this time. Fingers crossed that it all works out.
Murder Mystery Monday to myself, because I welcome in Courtney, my other half. And
hi.
Someone with an abiding interest in the true crime genre.
That is true.
Always good to have you here, but it's even more special this particular iteration. Iteration, by the way, a ding word. He is the host of a podcast that's very popular that deals with just this, unsolved murders. And in fact, the podcast is called Unsolved, isn't it?
Unsolved with Steve Gregory.
Unsolved with Steve Gregory. And here he is, Steve Gregory, everybody. Come on, from KFI Radio and iHeartRadio.
Yes.
It's a grim business you're in, Steve Gregory. But I must tell you, it seems as though there's certain bits of light in it, and this particular episode of your podcast that Courtney's heard it about 5. She's listened literally to your podcast, imagine 5 times. How long is the podcast? Steve, how long is
this first episode?
Well, they're based on the radio show, which airs every Saturday night from 7 to 9. So the podcast itself is just under an hour.
So you spent 5 hours with the podcast this weekend.
Yeah.
Okay.
5 hours with another man.
Well, then wait a minute. So I've got to ask though. So was it because I wasn't clear in how I was telling the story? You needed to keep, why 5 hours?
Why was it some failing on the part of Brother Gregory or not?
No, I mean the interview was extraordinary. So this is the 6th season of Unsolved with Steve Gregory, and this was the first episode, and it aired last night. Yeah.
You were excited about it, and you asked, can we get Steve to...
I did. I did want Steve to come on, and Steve's a friend of yours and a friend of the show, and I am such a fan. And no, it was more that this is the kind of research that I would do for any story, is listen to different podcasts or read different articles or pieces about the investigative work. And so I listened to it hoping that I wouldn't miss any of the details associated with the story.
So, and Steve does that too. I mean, his police contacts and his investigative contacts are so, he's really steeped in this world so well. And so I'll let you take the lead here to perhaps lead us into the conversation with Steve about, because this is a cold case that all of a sudden, as I say, might have this bizarre bit of light on it.
Yeah, exactly. There was a tip that was called in to the police last month. And the story is about Christina Rosenberger, who was murdered in Artesia, California, December 12th, 1983. But I will let Steve go into the story. But again, this is the 6th season of his podcast, Unsolved with Steve Gregory. This is the first episode, which was Bloody Bedroom.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
Go ahead,
Courtney.
Steve.
Appreciate it. So the one of the cold case detectives from the LA County Sheriff's Department's Homicide Bureau contacted me and said, I've got a case that, as Courtney mentioned, we got a tip on just randomly out of nowhere, more than 30 years ago. Think about that. Then all of a sudden the phone rings 30 days ago. And it was a caller on the other end that said, I know who killed Christina Rosenberger. And so this caller told the detectives very good detail. So the first thing the detectives are going to do is they're going to go back to the case file. They're going to look for the case file because it's not something that's necessarily on their desk. And remember, there's just in LA County Sheriff's Department alone, there's more than 4,700 unsolved cases. Approximately 10,000 unsolved cases, more than 10,000 in LA County, in with all the agencies involved. But just the Sheriff's Department's a little over 4,700 unsolved. So they've got to go back and look in the archives and find this particular case. And they did. And they searched through the file. And sure enough, the person's name that was mentioned in the tip was in the file multiple times in different references, in different reports. Because when investigators get on the scene, there is more than one report about any case like that, especially a murder case like that. You've got the first responding deputy or officer. They're going to take a report based on eyewitnesses at the scene or anyone that was loitering around. Then you've got the initial investigators that take a look at the scene and walk around. Then there might be a secondary investigator that comes in. Then you have the medical examiner investigator that comes in and writes its own report. So you've got multiple reports about the same case. And sometimes those reports don't jive because they've got different witnesses, or the witnesses change their story. And that's what happened here. So when they started looking at the name that was given in the tip, they realized that this person was sort of a, in air quotes, a legitimate person of interest, somebody they need to look at. So they began looking. And then when they started to look deeper into the case, they found out that now because of DNA, all the advancements in familial DNA and the new technologies in DNA, they had a DNA sample on file of the girl. She was 17 years old when she was stabbed repeatedly in the chest. She was left under her bed for dead. And then they shoved blankets and quilts up onto her side to try to conceal her under her bed in her bedroom. Her mother and her boyfriend and her brother walked in and out of that room multiple times, not even realizing she was under the bed the whole time.
So she lived in the house with her mother, right? As a 17-year-old?
Yeah, 17 years old. She had been taken to high school that morning. She went to Cerritos High School. And she was supposed to be home about midday. That was her schedule on that day. And then she came home to change, and then she would go to work at Sears and Roebuck. And they all thought she was at work. So when they came home, the boyfriend didn't hear from her. The boyfriend called, and this is before cell phones. So the boyfriend calls, and the mom's like, no, she must be at work. And he's like, well, I don't think she's at work. I went by and she's not there. And so that's when they started to search, and then they realized the mom walked in, and she was on the phone looking around the bedroom for any clues. And then she found a bloody sheet on the bed. And then when she started pulling back the sheets and the blankets underneath, she found her daughter there underneath with multiple stab wounds. So back to the investigators. So now they're looking at these names inside these files. And as they start to call around, they find out that Christina's mother is no longer living. Her birth father is not even in the picture. Then there was the live-in boyfriend, and the live-in boyfriend of the mother. He's no longer around. He died in a boating accident. That leaves the boyfriend. There was a guy seen running away from the house that day who's still alive. And there was another guy that lived down the corner around the street who's still alive. And he gave two different conflicting stories about what he was doing that day. So now investigators have 3 persons of interest to re-investigate as of now.
Just out of curiosity, Steve, the guy running from the house, as you put it, I mean, first, how do they establish who that was? You say he's still alive, so clearly they know who he is.
Witnesses.
Okay. So witnesses recognized him and were able to identify him, and cops were ready to. Why was he running from the house? Is that explained?
He had an excuse, but they wouldn't say what the excuse was because they don't want to. Okay. They don't want to taint that part of the investigation. But they said he offered an excuse as to why he was there, and he said he characterized it that he was actually not running away from the house, but he had tripped and fallen on the driveway. But the reason he was there, that's what they won't tell us.
Okay. All right, sorry. So continue, please. Okay.
Oh,
so we have. You're saying that there are three, as I understand it, guys, three people still around who, with knowledge, or with who might be people of interest, or whatever the term is, who the cops may want to speak to again.
Yeah, three persons of interest, and then in person of interest, everyone jumps to the conclusion that that's the suspect, and that's not the case. It's just that, a person of interest, and it could be a person of interest because they might have seen something, a person of interest because they might have inadvertently touched something or walked by something. It doesn't mean person of interest does not mean suspect, and that's one of those misnomers about investigations.
When someone has a story that changes, you reference that the stories didn't match up, or he's changed his story, I believe you said. How do cops treat that typically, and how are they treating it in this case?
Well, a cold case investigator can only do as good of a job as the people 30-something years ago did on the case. And what I mean by that is sometimes they'll open a file and there'll only be 3 sheets of paper in there with some scribbles on it, and that's it. Other times they might open a file and they might have a very, very detailed, comprehensive, and robust collection of notes and photos and reports and tests and what have you. In this particular case, there wasn't a lot to go on. There was some stuff, but not a lot to go on. The one person they were focused in on was the guy that changed his story multiple times. Right. And so what they want to do is they want to go back again. And now you've got new investigators looking at it. And here's the interesting thing that cold case detectives have told me over the years. Sometimes it plays in their favor to go back 30 years later and investigate somebody or re-interview them, because all of a sudden their demeanor is completely different. They might have a wife and children, a family now. They might have a great career, and guilt starts to set in for whatever role they played in someone's murder or demise. And sometimes that plays well into that, because the way they're sort of defending themselves in the interview is going to be contrastly different than it was 30-something years ago when they were first being interviewed.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's really interesting. So honestly, that's where we are now, right? With this case. Yeah.
As we speak, they've tracked them all down. They know where they live. I believe one of the 3 is out of state and the other 2 are in California. And they're in the process of getting their travel arranged, and they are going to go be paying in-person visits to all 3 of these individuals.
The person who called in this information, they know who this person is?
Yes. And what they've said is, and here's why the detectives were sort of conflicted with it, because the person who called in the tip, it was based on information they got from somebody else. So it was third-party information.
Oh, I see.
So detectives are a little skittish about that until they actually opened the case file and started to read this individual's name. And they realized, well, this individual is tied pretty closely to all of the investigation here, and this name keeps popping up. But for some reason, and this is what the detective told me, the investigators then did not pursue this individual very strongly. And that's one of the reasons why he wished he could go back and talk to the investigators. And I believe the original investigators long since passed away. No. That's the other thing that hamstrings investigators today, cold case detectives. If this is a case more than a few years ago, odds are the investigators are no longer with us, or they're retired, or they don't have their notes anymore, or they've completely forgotten.
Wow. It's tough work. I mean, I really give those people that you deal with regularly, and Courtney, that you read about regularly, and I'm talking about those homicide investigators, such great credit. I mean, it's such a grim business to begin with, but they feel, I know 1 or 2, and they feel really driven. They feel really like a cause sort of motivated, and it's a really terrific part of police work. So, yeah.
Well, when you think about the cold case detectives for the LA County Sheriff's Department, there are a dozen retired investigators that have come back to work on an hourly rate. I believe they're only funded for 40 hours a month per person. and they have to reapply for funding every year for just those 12 people. So they're retired investigators who got out of the business, and then they turn right around and are rehired. They call them hirebacks. And then they come back and they work for the department as a part-time cold case investigator for 40 hours a month. And so that is, to your point, Mark, that's dedication.
That really is. Well, I did not know that. That's extraordinary. So it makes it even more extraordinary when these cold cases are busted, busted open. Keep us posted on this. So go ahead. What's that, Steve? Yeah.
No, I was just going to say what's really cool is there's a couple of cold case investigators that I've had on the show that were the original investigators 20 years ago. And so they would bring their personal notes and photos from the scene and show them to me. And it's really fascinating to look at them 20 years ago, and they still are no further along today than they were 20 years ago. And so they turn to me to give it a little bit of sunshine and hoping that it shakes the trees a bit.
Yeah, somebody knows something. One of the things I like about your podcast is that you, and it's a radio show, obviously, that then goes on podcast and iHeartRadio. You can get it. It's you let them talk. I like those podcasts, long form, where because they've got so much to say, and we're used to a podcast world where everything's really heavily edited and there are a bunch of sound effects added, and that has its own virtues. But I love that you have a kind of more, what am I trying to say? A less choreographed conversation. You sort of just you let it go. Yeah. I look
at myself as the traffic cop. I'm just the traffic cop. They're the true storytellers. I'm just there to make sure we get out on time, get in on time, and keep the dialogue moving. And then I will tell you, though, after January, we will be switching up the podcast, and it will be its own entity now. And we'll be starting to do cases from outside of LA County. We've got cases now that we're booking in Las Vegas, Oklahoma, Canada, Dubai. And so we're going to be doing cases from all over the world just on the podcast side, and then the radio show will stay hyper local.
That's great. I think it's terrific.
Wow.
Yeah. So you'll come back and visit, and we'll as you relaunch with the expanded look at the universe of the podcast.
Appreciate
that'd be great.
The support.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, Courtney, thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate you both being here. That's Mark's Murder Mystery Monday.
You betcha. My pleasure.
Yeah.
Mark's Murder Mystery Monday on The Mark Thompson Show.
Feel it in your soul. The Mark Thompson Show.
It is the Mark Thompson Show. Whoopsies. And I'm Kim McAllister by myself on this, the Mark Thompson Show. Yeah, let's see if I can keep that from playing again. What? I'm Kim McAllister. It is the Mark Thompson Show. And let's do a little bit of news. How about we get to something I'm actually good at? I like that idea. This is the news here on the Mark Thompson Show. Let's see if I can play the news theme without having that repeat as well. That's right. Lord, I'm Kim McAllister. It is the Mark Thompson Show. And I have some stories for you this morning, some pretty important ones. There's a deal to free hostages being held by Hamas that might be in the works. That's what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on NBC's Meet the Press. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization said Gaza's main hospital has gone 3 days without power and is no longer functioning. Things are dire. A possible government shutdown here in America looming. House Speaker Mike Johnson laying out a plan over the weekend, and the House is set to take up his bill next week. This comes as Friday's funding deadline inches ever closer. Donald Trump Jr. back on the stand as the first defense witness in the Trump Organization's civil fraud trial in New York. Lawyers representing former President Trump said his sons and their company are starting their defense today. The Trump Family Organization is being accused of inflating their wealth to obtain better loans. The Pentagon is releasing more information now about the 5 Army soldiers killed in a helicopter crash in the eastern Mediterranean Sea on Friday. According to a military spokesman, an MH-60 Black Hawk was conducting aerial refueling training when this aircraft experienced an in-flight emergency resulting in the crash. Officials say there were no indications of any hostile actions there. More than 55 million Americans will travel 50 miles or more for Thanksgiving this year. That according to AAA, a projection. Most will drive to their destinations. 4.7 million travelers set to fly. If there is a government shutdown and that affects air traffic control, that will be an absolute mess. Speaking of the potential shutdown, Moody's Investor Service is cutting its outlook on the country's credit rating to negative, down from stable. The change was made Friday, citing high interest rates and doubts about the government being able to implement effective fiscal policy. Economy at the box office, no good either. A pretty rough start for the Marvels. The Disney movie that brings back Captain Marvel made an estimated $47 million in its premiere weekend, and that is the worst opening in the Marvel Cinematic Universe history, unfortunately. This newscast is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore. We love them. They are the home of the Mark Thompson Why Are You Yelling Red and the Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson Pinot Grigio? It is a lovely place to go have a flight of wine, do some wine tasting in the Livermore Valley, and look out at that gorgeous vista. The saying there at Tenuta Vineyards is give them 30 minutes and they'll be your friends for life. And it's true because they're so friendly and so kind. You can also order online, and there is a special whiz-bang exclusive deal for the Mark Thompson Show listener and viewer. And that is an exclusive 10% off across the board. So if you're ordering a case of wine for the holidays, maybe to give out as gifts or maybe to have with holiday meals, you can enter, or you can call rather, the winery and say, smash it with your iron rod, and you get your 10% off. So you have to say, smash it with your iron rod, and you get 10% off at Tenuta in Livermore. And I will give you the phone number. It is Rich at Tenuta, 925-699-4576 at the Tenuta Vineyards in beautiful Livermore. Okay, I'm Kim McAllister, and that is the news here on the Mark Thompson Show. Let's get into some other stories, if I can get the pictures taken down and everything dealt with. Okay. Yes, I'm Kim McAllister, in for Mark Thompson today. As you can see, I'm flying solo here on the show. The boys are all off today, so I'm trying to keep everything running. We've got Karen Dawn coming in a little bit after 12:30 to talk about animals, but there's some other stories that I was hoping we could talk about as well. One of them does include Donald Trump, of course. I know people are tired of Trump, but there's this fascinating story that Donald Trump thought he was going to be reinstated. I don't know how he got this in his brain, but a new report by ABC's Jonathan Karl reveals that Donald Trump became fixated on something that is completely unconstitutional, that he could be reinstated as a president some 8 months after losing the 2020 election. No. Jonathan Karl has an upcoming book. It's called Tired of Winning. Tired of Winning, pardon. He's not the only one that reported that Donald Trump thought he'd be reinstated. Maggie Haberman also said the same thing, that he legitimately thought that he was going to be put back into office somehow. Some of his advisors downplay it a little bit, say, no, he was just, musing that would happen. But Jonathan Karl says there was a statement in June of 2021 that Trump used the phrase 2024 or before. And so Jonathan Karl asked Trump about it. He said, what do you mean by that? You don't really think there's a way you would get reinstated before the next election, do you? He said, I'm going to explain it to you, Jonathan, because you wouldn't either understand it or write it. The reinstatement theory was pushed by the MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell. It was also pushed by Jenna Ellis, who recently had to plead guilty in the Georgia election case and only got a slap on the wrist for it. It was a QAnon kind of thing. But apparently Jonathan Karl said Trump talked a lot about this in private, that he could actually somehow be reinstated. Delusional, completely and totally delusional. I don't know any other way to say it. Also delusional is Trump wanting the election interference trial, federal. You have to specify which trial now. Federal trial in Washington, D.C. to be televised, which they don't usually do. But it's like a big campaign stop for him, right? If it's televised, then it's like a free airtime rally that the whole nation watches. I guess that's what he's thinking. So instead of being humiliated and embarrassed to be hauled into court, he drops the embarrassment and just says, hey, I'll use this for myself. Special counsel's office apparently pushing back against this whole thing. Trump says he wants cameras in the courtroom as a transparent effort to demand special treatment. Now, we've heard Jim Avila say the American people deserve to see what's going on here, that there should actually be cameras in the courtroom, right? Because we are all victims of Trump trying to steal this election, and we all need to know exactly who it is that's running for president and see it in court. Part of me agrees with that, but part of me also knows that Trump would use this to his own advantage. And I don't want him to have the advantage because I feel like he's so incredibly dangerous. So federal courts bar TV cameras. That's just the flat rule there. The press has argued for more transparency. They want to see what's going on, especially because this Trump case is really historic. You know, I mean, we say all the time, never seen anything like this, but we truly have never seen anything like this with a former U.S. president accused of stealing an election, interfering in an election. So it is unprecedented. I would agree with that. But he says, Trump, if you don't let me speak to the American people, if you don't broadcast this, then I can't expose that this is a wrongful prosecution. This whole trial is supposed to start in March. The Justice Department apparently is opposed to having cameras in the courtroom. My friend Nikki Maduro says she thinks that it's reverse psychology, that if the Justice Department opposes it, it'll make Donald Trump want it even more. I don't know. What we get, though, is the hand-drawn artist renderings and maybe a couple of photos. That's all we get. And written transcripts to document everything. What do you think? Do you think this trial should be televised? Do you want to give Trump an advantage if it is televised? Or do you feel the American people have more of a right to see it and to know it? Or are we playing then right into Trump's hands? Mindy writing today, Trump is a danger to democracy and our entire system of all America. He is bad to the bone. That's true. John says, courtroom cameras aren't the same as they used to be. Hell no, says Mary. Hell no. Thumbs down to the cameras in the courtroom, huh? Yeah. I'm torn. I'm truly torn. One camera, says Beth, looking at the judge and the witnesses only. He'll know you'll be able to hear him, though. Right? Mindy saying Trump is so arrogant and using all the camera time to promote himself. Same old, same old. And Beth says, yeah, this whole thing is going to be an absolute circus. Randy talking about being reinstated. Yeah, delusional. Absolutely. But I go back and forth because on one hand, I feel like we have a right to see it. It affects all of us. I'm still so shocked that people aren't more upset about this. I was talking to a friend over the weekend. I'll share that with you in a moment. Lady Beatrice says we've had enough of the Trump show being televised as what he wants. Heck to the no. I understand it. I'm not completely opposed to what you're saying. But I have a friend I was talking to over the weekend, and she said, regarding the Trump trial, it's outrageous. She said, and so is everything that's happening with Biden. I don't want any of them in there. I thought to myself, there's completely different. This is completely different. She said, well, why don't you want Trump to win? And she's not a Trumper by any stretch of the imagination. And I said, because He tried to steal an election from the American people. He tried to defraud America. He's in it for himself and no one else. But people I know and love still don't get how egregious and serious that is. If you love America, whoever you are, whatever party you are claiming allegiance to, Republican, Democrat, Green, Independent, whatever. If you love this country, you don't love Donald Trump. You want a president that loves the country more than himself or herself, right? You want someone in charge of America that believes in the Constitution, that believes in the ideals that this country was founded upon, that believes it when they stand up and put their hand on whatever text they want to, religious text or whatever they're swearing upon that they believe in, that they're there to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. You want someone who believes it with their whole heart. And he has shown at every single turn he doesn't love America. He loves himself more than he loves the country. And he certainly doesn't believe in the Constitution. And his oath meant nothing to him. Maybe I'm too Pollyanna about the whole thing, but I take that very, very seriously. Vicky writing today that, what'd she say? I just clicked on it. Trump had better wake up to the danger of Trump. Oh, people had better wake up to the danger of Trump. The time is short. I agree with you. And it's frightening that they don't see it already, Vicky. I don't even get it. Russ says, hi, Russ. On a bright side, televising the trial will make America lose weight because we'll all be throwing up. Maybe. I don't know. Kathy says televising the trial would put the witnesses in jeopardy. Perhaps. And maybe that's why the judge won't do it, because we know that the Trump, I want to call them the thugs, the underbelly of the Trump supporters. They threaten, they call, and they write, and they show up, and they threaten people, and it's dangerous. John Watson is saying, Trump thinks he's going to be reinstated, shows you how little he paid attention to high school civics class. He didn't know. He doesn't care. Trump is massively popular with about 30% of the electorate. About 10% more tolerate him because he's a Republican, writes John. Walter doesn't want this trial turned into a campaign rally. Agree. But on the other hand, I agree with Jim Avila that we have a right to see it and know it. Here's the scenario. And I think maybe this is what Jim is thinking, that if it's truly laid out, the trial laid out in front of the American people, and the American people see the evidence of election interference, then how could we not understand that he's bad for this country, right? If the evidence is laid out before us all, how could we not see it? I would argue the evidence was laid out before us all in the televised January 6th hearings that Congress held. And there's still people that don't believe it. I mean, I don't know what more of a case they could have made at every single turn. Oh, I think the people who are going to support Trump are just always going to support him. And it doesn't matter what evidence you lay out in front of them. They don't care. They won't care. They're still going to support him. It's like they do it with this fervor, almost like an addiction or something. I don't know what it is. So I'm on the fence about whether the trial should be televised or whether it shouldn't. I kind of waffle back and forth about the whole thing. Square says Trump has a contingency plan for televised or not. Gordon writing, it will change minds to not vote for him. The cameras need to be in that courtroom. I don't know what's fake, Andrew. What you're saying is fake. I mean, I don't think it's fake that he tried to defraud the American people, that he tried to steal an election. I think if you and I were debating on that, I'd be the one coming with the evidence and you would be the one coming with a bunch of Trumpisms. But maybe that's not what you meant by that, so I don't want to ascribe that to you. Vilma says he's still trying to defraud America. That's right. Andrew says, why is he not in jail yet? So clearly I was wrong in your other comment. Yes. Jim writing, the Trump base could care less about the case against Trump. They've proved that daily. It's all true. And it's not something we don't know. So then why would we give them the opportunity to have a free rally that is a trial that would be, I would imagine, as much of a trial of the century as an OJ trial, right? So all of America stops and watches, and it's a free campaign appearance for him every day. No. I don't see that as being positive or conducive. And so maybe we just leave it up to the jury and we leave it up to the trial and we just, get our news from reporters and the court sketch artist every day. I don't know. I agree with you, John Radley. John Radley says his supporters will never change their minds no matter how solid a case is laid out, and he will use cameras in the courtroom to turn the trial into the Trump show, and we can't let that happen. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where I come down on it too, John Radley. I think that's where I do. Part of me as a member of the media, I want to tell you the truth. I want to give you all the information. I want to lay it out for you. I want to say, look at all these facts. But I know that this is such a weird case. It's like the facts don't matter. That's what leaves me scratching my head. The facts don't matter. Let's move on to the Supreme Court of the United States, trying to address the ethics concerns that they have had. Concerns is laughable. You mean the extreme ethics violations? The screeching across the ethics border with wild abandon? That concern? Yeah, that's a little bit concerning, I would say. They're trying to put into place this new Supreme Court code of conduct. But there's a lot of questions still. So today, the Supreme Court announced a code of conduct in an attempt to kind of get people back on board and more confident in the Supreme Court, right? This after, of course, we have seen stories really mostly featuring Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. The statement the justice has made is that the code is substantially derived from an existing code of conduct that applies to the lower court, but has been adapted to the unique institutional setting of the Supreme Court. But what they didn't do is explain how it would actually work, who would have to enforce it. They said they had some more work to do, especially on their financial disclosures. Well, you better fix that fast, because if you're trying to get the American people to trust you again, let me be the first one to raise my hand and say, we don't. We don't trust you anymore. We've seen that you accept money from people and trips from people, and that you also tried to defraud the American people and then turned around and voted in favor or been sympathetic to those who have given you the money. It's what? A pay for a vote? Is that what it is? And even if it isn't, that's what we think of it now because of your ethics, your poor ethics. So they say we might need more resources to perform an initial ongoing review of when they need to be, the justices need to recuse themselves and when they don't, and other ethics issues. They call this the absence of a code, leading in recent years to the misunderstanding that the justices of this court, unlike other jurists in this country, regard themselves as unrestricted by any ethics rules. This is according to the justice's statement. To dispel this misunderstanding, we are issuing this code, which largely represents a codification of principles that we have long regarded as governing our conduct. Well, maybe some of you regarded that for a long time. I would argue others of you thought, well, there's no one to enforce it, and it's not really a rule. I guess that means I don't have to play by that rule. The code of conduct that they are issuing, it's pretty interesting. I'm trying to exactly see what read you what the code is. It's long. I think we can imagine, they're not supposed to take money from people, that when you have someone of direct interest in a case, that you recuse yourself from the case. It's going to take a long time, I think, before people believe that the Supreme Court, before their image could be restored, if ever. As it used to be, they were beyond reproach. It used to be, that's why they had a lifetime appointment, right? Because we didn't want them beholden to special interests or trying to run for re-election or trying to keep their job. We wanted their focus to be on the issues and nothing else. And now we don't believe it. We just don't believe it. Let me see what you guys have to say about this, but I mean, without anyone to enforce it, without any penalties if you break a rule, right? Your job has to be in jeopardy. If you break the rule, you're out. There has to be some horrible consequence or penalty, or justices like Clarence Thomas will still have their hand out to take the giant bus in the new house. No. I don't believe it. RN Sue wants us to expand the court. Okay, fine, but they still need rules, I would argue, right? They still need rules. Let's see, this is from Maud. We can hope and dream to be above the law as much as the Supreme Court. Sigh. Eric Kennedy writing today, I feel sad for the Biden SCOTUS appointees who will never get the respect they deserve. Yeah. Because the Supreme Court is looking, I mean, I would say up until maybe 2 years ago, I was completely in the dark about what the truth was that was happening there. I thought they could vote their conscience and really look at evidence and they were, you know, really Juris Doctors in that they were trying to be fair and they were trying to look at the issues and they were really trying to make the right decisions for the country. And they didn't have people trying to bribe them. They didn't have all this other riffraff thing happening like is happening in Congress and the Senate and everywhere else in politics. They were above the fray, as it were. But it turns out they're I would say, I was going to say knee deep in the fray. I would say the fray is over their heads. So, yeah, what a total and utter disappointment. Karen writes, I have no respect for the Supreme Court, haven't since they misconstrued the Second Amendment. I can't disagree with that. And I think, of course, when you look at what happened with Roe v. Wade, that shocked people, women, to their very core, that right could be taken from us. So we'll see what they have to do. How they can put in their new ethics code of conduct and have it actually have some teeth to it, or whether it's all just bluster and talk on their part. I tend to think it's bluster and talk, and that's what we're getting. So don't look away from that. We need to hold them to higher standards. Today, the members of SAG-AFTRA are set to be voting on whether or not they'll take this tentative deal that does include AI provisions. And we've seen before Justine Bateman, who spoke out when talking about AI. And she says the only reason union members should approve this deal is if they don't want to work anymore. That's what she's saying. She's saying don't. The new contract apparently was approved by 86% of the union board members on Friday. And so now it's the rank and file union members that are voting. Bateman's is the union's advisor for generative AI. She's super smart, this one. She says she feels studio executives are choosing to no longer be in the film and series business. She said, I think they sort of like to think of themselves as being tech barons themselves or something. But this doing projects that don't involve humans, you're not in the film business anymore. People who don't want to have any human involved have never really been on a set. They don't know what it's like to make a film. She said, as a filmmaker herself, Justine Bateman, she said, I'm never using generative AI. I like what people do as members of a crew, members of the writers, the editors, the cinematographers, makeup artists, and actors. And so she said, approve this contract, depends on what you want. She said, soon they'll have customized films for you based on your particular viewing history, and they won't even bother to copyright them because it'll be like Kleenex. They'll make a million of them an hour, and it won't matter to them. You'll be able to get yourself scanned, get yourself put in these pieces, and there will be a novelty that eventually will wear off because people will still hunger for something real and something human. The train track, she said, is split. One train track is going, okay, we're going to participate in this sort of negotiation with the cannibals, and we're going to talk about just how you're going to be cutting off my foot. And are you going to grill it or boil it? And what kind of sauce are you going to put on it? That track is the one that includes generative AI. And she says she's on a completely different train track. I'm going to making human things for human audiences with human crews and casts and so forth. And we'll see what happens. Is it up to us as the audience to say what we want and what we don't? Do we only then consume human-made, human-acted, human crew on the train track where Justine Bateman wants to take us? And we reject movies made with AI? That people were scanned and then the AI can make them do whatever they want, say whatever they want? Is it up to us? Because I think it will be. Because if we're just blindly consuming all these things, then the money that it takes to make a film like Justine Bateman would make versus the money that it would take to make the AI movies that she says will be like a Kleenex you throw away are completely different. And so we have to demand human-made movies, you know? Human-made shows like this with all the mistakes therein. That's what we have to demand. Otherwise, it's just going to be Max Headroom everywhere we look. And I don't want it to be that way. I really don't want that. So she says, don't vote for this contract. There's just not enough. There's some AI in it as far as how to handle it. And there's some new rules as regarding how to pay actors via streaming. But I think she's might be right on the money that it's not strong enough when it comes to AI. Another story before we get to Karen Dawn, who's joining us to talk about animals in just a moment. This one is about President Biden trying to get federal staffers to come back into the White House. He's not having the same problem that everybody's having. Once you get people working from home, people want to stay working from home. The commute is a bitch. Nobody wants to do it. Ride into the office, pay for wear and tear on the car here in the Bay Area, pay for tolls over whatever bridge you're traveling over, right? Pay for BART, pay for whatever, and have the extra hour or whatever it is to get to and from your office. When that money or that time could be spent working or more with your family. So the White House Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, calling for cabinet members to use September and October to aggressively execute plans to get more federal employees to return to the office in person. But there's been little progress on that whole thing because there's no system in place to enforce that edict. And there apparently has been no penalties for departments and agencies that fail to comply with this. So why force your people to come back if the government's not going to be upset about it and not going to fire you for it? All right. There's no goals being set for what in-person work looks like. So we've seen some companies, they have 3 days a week you have to come into the office. The government isn't saying that. And so it'll be, I think, probably more difficult for them to get people to come back in the office. There's a union for federal employees as well, with a very strong voice. And so I think a lot of employees feel like they're backed by this union that will support them, and they don't want to come back in. And honestly, I understand not wanting to come back in. So we'll see how it works with federal employees and whether or not they'll be able to get them to come back into federal offices. A lot of people still working from home, and it doesn't look like that on Bay Area roadways right now, but I think, you know, we're definitely seeing this rebellion where people are saying, I just don't want that life. I just don't want that life where I have to come back in every single day. I don't know if you heard this story about President Biden's granddaughter's Secret Service agents protecting her. apparently fired shots at suspects trying to break into an unmarked agency vehicle. The CNN reported today the agency involved was assigned to Naomi Biden's detail. Secret Service agents saw 3 people breaking a window on a parked, unoccupied vehicle in Georgetown late Sunday night, and they opened fire. So, pretty scary situation there. I do have a little bit more information about those 3 people that we saw earlier, the live pictures of them scaling down the side of the Transamerica building in a repelling move during the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. Apparently, it isn't part of a protest. It's part of a performance. It's a permitted performance, according to the San Francisco Police Department. They said, don't be alarmed. Enjoy the show. It would have been nice if they put that out ahead of time, right? 3 people rappelled down the side of the Transamerica Pyramid just before noon today in orange or red outfits. It's part of an Oakland-based vertical dance group known as Bandaloop. So apparently they were dancing and rappelling down the side of the Transamerica building in San Francisco, and it was a permitted show. So look at that. Check it out. Don't be worried about it. It's okay. All right. I'm super excited now because I have Karen Dawn, who comes on every Monday to talk about animals. And I was telling Karen earlier that I was reading this obituary in the Press Democrat, this woman who died in her 90s, and she was an advocate for fawns. She wanted to find a way to help the world. And so she decided that she was going to work in fawn rescue. And she didn't know much about it when she started. But by the end of her life, she had written books and become the foremost authority on how to rescue fawns, how to feed them in captivity, how to take care of them so that they would be able to be set free and back into the wild. She made this huge impact on fawns and deer in the state of California and really nationally because she became a national expert. And she said that passion that she had for helping deer became her life's mission and helped her live longer because she had a purpose. And I just read it and I thought of Karen Dawn and her mission and her purpose and how important the work she is doing is. And so without any further ado, I would love to bring Karen Dawn onto the Mark Thompson Show. Hi, Karen.
Hello, Kim. I'm going to live to 120 in that case.
There you go. You have, well, it's true though, that when you have a passion and you find a purpose in your life that you want, you are invested in pushing forward, that you have something to live for, right?
Yeah, you got a reason to be here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think so many of us just go through life and we never find that thing. But you did. You have this thing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was a happy singer, songwriter, musician person when I learned what was happening to animals. And I tell you, life was a bit more fun before, but it's more meaningful now, I guess. So
yeah.
I can't believe the boys have left you without a producer today, Kim.
I know. Mark's going to look back at the show and go, yeah, we can't do that again. No.
Not fair to you. You've done amazingly, though. I've just, the sound goes out and you just keep soldering on and you get it back on. And it's like, good for you.
Trying the best we can.
I'm impressed. I think a lot of people who don't, do much behind the scenes on podcasts might not really know how darn hard that is to do this without a producer.
Well, to be talking and then trying to reboot your computer at the same time is always really interesting. I have 2 computers, by the way. That's how I was able to do that.
It's funny. I've been loving the show, and so interesting what you were talking about, them not being able to get people back into offices. A good chunk of that is that during the pandemic, everybody adopted animals, and then the shelters emptied out, and fell in love with them. So time comes to go back to the office and they don't want to leave them. And so when there was a lot of news coverage about this, actually, that when there was a real shortage of workers, a lot of people had the power to say, well, I'll come back in as long as you make the office dog friendly or whatever, because people don't. That's one of the reasons people don't want to go back in. I think most of us know it's a lot easier to work when you've got a cat on your lap. So that stops people from wanting to come in.
Well, let's talk about this situation with this. We've heard stories like this again earlier with kids that raise these animals for 4-H, and then they have to be sold off at fairs. And once you're in this group doing this, there's no way out of auctioning off the animals at the end, presumably for slaughter. And a couple of kids have gotten involved and said, wait, backtrack. I'm attached to this animal. I don't want to do that. I want to keep this animal. I don't want it to be auctioned off. And they find huge resistance from the authorities that are involved in auctioning off the animals. And we have a case like that with this goat.
Right. And 4-H didn't start 100 years ago. I mean, it started a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And it was generally assumed that all of us needed to be eating meat, and that, when kids didn't want to eat meat, they needed to be put back on the right track. And what 4-H did, and I'm a fan of people being aware and conscious of what they're doing. So it actually introduced the kids to those animals who were going to become meat, and they raised them. And then they didn't all want to have them killed. And it's this beautiful movie called At the Fork. And it's such a great movie because it really looks at welfare laws, and it looks at the possibility of veganism. It doesn't tell people what they should do, how they should feel, but it really explores, is the best thing to do to eat meat with good welfare? Is the best thing to do to go vegan? And there is a segment on that on 4-H, and it shows these kids crying over these animals who they have to give up. And I think in the original days, they were always pretty strict about this. Parents told their kids, but 100 years ago, parents used to beat their kids as well. We've kind of changed our idea about parenting. And we've changed our ideas about meat eating. Not that everybody's saying, and I never come on and say, you all have to be vegan. Mm-hmm. But, I think most people these days, if you think your 10-year-old kid has to eat meat, well, you really need to get better informed. I mean, that's why a lot of the younger generation are veg, because when they, as children, feel like they want to go veg, we no longer have parents saying, you have to do that. There's just a softer way. So unfortunately, as usual, the laws and the powers that be have not caught up with the way most people feel. So we had a situation in Shasta County where this young girl, and she was 9 years old at the time, and there she's a little older with a photo of Seder the goat, because there's a lawsuit about this now. She raised Seder to go to the fair, which, of course, as you said, means going eventually to auction and to slaughter. And just as the fair is rolling around, she's realizing she doesn't want to do this. And Mum gets in touch with the fair and says, look, she's in love with this goat. She's been taking him around, treating him like a doggy. She's just doesn't have the heart for this. We want to back out. What do we do? And they said, you can't back out. You've signed a contract. You have to go forward. So they go to the fair, and Seder gets sold to... and it's actually Senator Dahl's office, and for $900 and something. And Seder is supposed to be barbecued at an event, a church event on a Sunday. And so the night before they're supposed to give Seder up, Mum comes in and she finds her 9-year-old daughter just sobbing on Seder's fur. And she's like, I can't do this. She reaches out again and she says, we'll pay you back, we'll do whatever you need to do. And she gets permission from Senator Dahl's office, who's like, absolutely, if the girl cannot, bear to part with the goat, we're not going to insist. And, sure, they'll take the money or whatever they're owed, so they won't be in breach of contract. But The fair people say, absolutely not. So mum just decides, look, I can't do this. And we learned from the lawsuit that the girl has lost 3 grandparents over the last year. And mum is just like, I can't do this. She'll be traumatized for life. So mum takes the goat, and they bring the goat to a farm that's 50 miles away and decides she'll deal with the consequences. And she's not saying, screw you to the fair. She's saying, look, I went and got permission from the people who bought him. They said it's fine. They'll use another goat or whatever. And there she is. This is her at the age of 9 with Seda the goat, who she's just completely in love with. And but so mum moves the goat. The folks from the fair tell mum that they're going to have her charged with grand theft, which is a felony, which you can go to jail for not turning her daughter's beloved pet goat in. Then they get the police involved, and the Shasta and Nicholas Kristof, who I'm sure a lot of your viewers and listeners read, the New York Times columnist. He's just one of the most beloved writers in the country. He covered this, and he just wrote, he just cannot believe that with all the things that the police and could be in law enforcement could be dealing with, and with the fentanyl problems in Shasta County, whatever. I'll get you to read that quote out from him because it's so helpful. Kim, if
He
you don't
says,
mind.
I'm astonished that the best use of Shasta County taxpayers' money was to dispatch 2 deputies on a full day's journey, not to fight crime or addiction. Fentanyl overdose deaths quintupled in Shasta County in 2021, the last year for which there is data, but to ensure the slaughter of a girl's pet goat. That, again, from New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof. Yeah.
Right. And that's exactly what they do.
And it's totally true, too. I mean, come on.
Oh, my gosh. This is what we want our taxpayer dollars spent for. Yeah. So, and well, we'll get to this later. But so they forcibly take the goat. And we don't know exactly what happened to the goat and whether Seda was actually served at this barbecue. We're going to guess not, since the senator knew how badly the girl didn't want him given up. But the goat was killed. And mom has sued the fair and the police department for, the trauma that was done to this girl is incredible. And I don't think anybody wants their taxpayer dollars spent on this. And they've sued because, they would have been in breach of contract, but you actually are allowed to breach a contract. They hadn't handed over the goat yet. So it would not have been grand theft. They were, bullying. They were bullying her and terrifying her. It would have been breach of contract. And if you breach a contract, you have to do something to make up the contract. And the people on the other end of the contract already said, we don't care. So, we're not going to do this. So mum has sued with the help of a wonderful animal organization. And I'm trying to remember the name of Vanessa's legal firm, but we can dig it up and put it in the chat. Yeah. For violating the young girl's rights to change her mind, and for the ridiculous behavior of law enforcement to go and, insist and really bully their way in and demand that this goat be taken and slaughtered. So this all came out a few months ago in the news. And that's when Nicholas Kristof wrote his column. And I'm thrilled to say the Sacramento Bee had it on their front page, which is important because the Sacramento Bee is what our state's legislators read. And they've got to know that this is not acceptable, and that sure, and like in letters to the editor, there are a few people who said, well, the girl's got to be toughened up, but the vast majority of people don't think what the world needs now is less love. So if a little girl changes her mind, just why would you intentionally traumatize her? This is back in the news. This was over the weekend because now the Attorney General, in his wisdom, has decided to countersue the mum for causing all this trouble, which if they had just let her change her mind and they could use a different goat at the barbecue, none of this would have happened. And of course, Mum's not suing because she wants to make millions of dollars, and that's not why this animal activist law firm is suing.
Right.
It's just, you sue so that people don't just get away with this and do it again. And if 4-H is meant to keep on keeping on, and people that can have different feelings about whether they think 4-H is a great idea or a terrible idea, we've got to change it, that if you've got a kid who's hopelessly fallen in love with their animal, that they don't have to give the animal up to be barbecued.
I guess one could make the argument that 4-H then, their whole point is to raise leaders in agriculture, right? And so if you're teaching someone about agriculture, then you have to teach them, I'm playing devil's advocate, then you have to teach them that when you raise an animal, you're raising it, you're in business, right?
Yes.
And so you have a contract to someone, you honor the contract. It's all about, I get that it's all about business, but it just seems that you're dealing with children. And so you have to be a little more sensitive about what's happening.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Absolutely. There is an argument to be made that even when a contract isn't easy to honor, you honor it. But this is a 9-year-old girl. And as you said, we're raising people, 4-H, the idea is that we're training people who are going to be leaders in agriculture. I think it's safe to say this girl wasn't meant to be one of those.
Right.
Not everybody's cut out for it.
Yeah.
And if you're so not cut out for it that you were sobbing over this animal, okay, well, then do something to make up that contract. And again, of course, that's my opinion. I'm an animal rights activist, and I don't want to see any goats slaughtered for human food. But the point is that I think, the vast majority of people who just have decent hearts don't want our resources used this way to go and, bust into this place and grab this goat so that it can be slaughtered, despite how badly the 9-year-old girl and her mother are trying to save it, and despite them having really done all the right things to save this goat, including getting permission from the people who bought the goat to pack out. So, and that's, it's a story, the kind of story I love to bring to you. Because, as I mentioned, sure, I'm an animal rights activist, I'm vegan. So, and I know that my way of looking at the world is not yet the majority. And I don't tell other people they need to see the world the way I do. But at least let's get to the point where our laws and the way the government is doing things reflects how most people feel. And I don't think most people want this poor 9-year-old girl bullied into giving up this goat and having to deal with the consequences.
As a matter of fact, it makes me upset that, as you were saying, that's where we put our resources when there's so much happening and there's so much crime and there's so much, we have stores closing because people are going in and stealing products by the armload, and we're concerned about some girl's goat. Like, really, that's our focus? Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. But Karen Dawn, thank you for always. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to, before we go, I just wanted to do a tiny little update, which is last week we talked again about a situation where the government just is not in line with the way the humans feel, the people feel. And that is this Catalina deer situation where they've decided they're going to go in and kill off all the deer on the island, despite the fact that 90% of the human residents there don't want them killed, and they love them, and they'd much rather see them dealt with by doing something about the reproductive cycles, putting something in deer feed, something like that. So I just wanted to mention that in the newspaper on Saturday in the Los Angeles Times, there was a wonderful letter there from a gal who was on the Catalina Conservancy 10 years ago. These are the folks who are now trying to kill all the deer, who's saying that the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors does have jurisdiction over the situation. And whereas the Conservancy was trying to just get away with this without anybody noticing, thank heavens the Los Angeles Times has decided to cover it, and we're trying to get a hearing now before the Board of Supervisors. And there is a petition that I'm going to add to the comment thread after you and I sign off, in case anybody is interested and wants to learn more about the situation with the Catalina deer, that the they're talking about just wiping off the island, despite the fact that most people don't want them totally wiped off the island. So
I have the petition address in the chat and also at the bottom of the screen. You just have to put a dash in between everything. So it's change.org /p/stop the slaughter of mule deer on Catalina Island with a dash in between all the words. You can see it on the screen and it's also in the chat.
I just want to mention, when we're chatting, I don't look at all the comments coming in, though I'm certainly interested in them, because if anybody has questions, I'd love to get to them. But, last week I remember somebody wrote, well, does she honestly think it's just like controlling deer on your lawn or something like that? And I wasn't saying that, and I wasn't saying I had the answers, but I think it was Karen Cooper who just summed it up, saying, where there's a will, there's a way. And when you have a situation where the vast majority of people on the island love these deer and don't want them killed, and certainly the deer don't want to be killed, you find another way to control their population. And we do have contraceptives, and there are other ways to do things. So that's, unfortunately, it was presented in the press of, plants versus deer, and you don't care about plants if you care about deer. No, we just know, as Karen said, where there's a will, there's a way, and there's a way to control the population,
right?
Without wiping out all the beloved deer.
Well, it looks like they're trying to get 15,000 signatures on this, and so far they're at 13,333. So
right.
If you're interested in signing that petition, they could definitely use the help. Karen Dawn, thank you for bringing that to our attention and for talking about the goat as well. I love your appearances on Mondays, so thanks for being here with us on the Mark Thompson
Show. I love
Show.
that you have me on to talk about animals.
Yeah. All right, have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next Monday. Bye. That's Karen Dawn, everybody. All right. Well, thank you for being here on the Mark Thompson Show. Definitely some people to thank this afternoon. Lori started us off with a $20 super sticker. Thank you very much for that. Also, it's Beth Farmer with $20, hoping that Mark's crew gets paid enough to give us another tech person. Well, we have enough. It just so happened today that it seemed, one of those things didn't quite work. And Pinky with $2 a day. Thank you for the extra buck. Much appreciated. Thank you for all the ways you contribute to the show. Of course, you know that we have the website, which is themarkthompsonshow.com. You can see it there at the bottom of your screen. Themarkthompsonshow.com, the Patreon and the PayPal links are there, and we really appreciate anything you can do to help support this show and keep it rolling, whether it's just me or whether it's Mark and the rest of the crew as well. Thank you for that. Okay, next you'll find us at the After Party Live. A lot of fun stories today, including one story out of UC Davis where researchers think they may have found this protein that acts as a cancer killing switch. It can turn off the cancer switch. Really groundbreaking research being done there, and we'll get to that and a lot more. That's on the After Party Live next. Right now, I'll end it as we always do. Let's see if I can make this happen. I know I can do it. I know I can. Thank you for being here with me and for and putting up with me here as I try to muddle my way through on the Mark Thompson Show.